Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, I want to tell you a story about one of the most memorable weekends of my life. It was a weekend in Paris. I had always wanted to visit Paris. I had seen pictures of the Eiffel Tower, the beautiful streets, the small cafes, and the old buildings. But for years, Paris was only a dream. Then, one Friday morning, I decided to make that dream come true. I booked a flight, reserved a small hotel, and planned a short trip. I was going to spend the weekend in Paris. I was excited, but I was also a little nervous because it was my first time traveling to Paris alone. My flight was in the afternoon, so I woke up early on Friday. I checked my suitcase one more time. I packed a few shirts, a pair of jeans, comfortable shoes, a jacket, my phone charger, my passport, and a small notebook. I also packed an umbrella because the weather forecast said that it might rain. Before leaving home, I looked around my apartment. I checked the windows. I checked the kitchen. I made sure that I had turned off everything. Then I looked at my suitcase and smiled. Paris, here I come. I took a taxi to the airport. The airport was busy, but everything went smoothly. I checked in, went through security, and found my gate. While I was waiting for my flight, I bought a cup of coffee. I sat near the window and watched the airplanes. I couldn't believe that I was finally going to Paris. After several hours, my plane landed in Paris. When I walked out of the airport, I immediately felt different. Everything looked new. There were people everywhere. I could hear different languages around me. I took a deep breath and thought, I'm really here. I had written the address of my hotel in my notebook. I decided to take the train because it was cheaper than a taxi. At first, I was confused by the signs. There were many platforms and different train lines. I looked at my phone, checked the map, and finally found the right train. After about 40 minutes, I arrived near my hotel. But there was one problem. I couldn't find the hotel. I walked down one street, then another. I checked my phone again. The battery was already getting low. I started to worry. Then I saw a small cafe. I walked inside and asked a woman behind the counter, "Excuse me, do you know where this street is?" She looked at the address and smiled. "Yes, it's only a few minutes from here." She gave me directions. I thanked her and followed the street. A few minutes later, I finally saw my hotel. I was tired, but I was happy. The hotel was small and cozy. There were flowers near the entrance and a little cafe on the ground floor. I walked to the reception desk. "Hello, I have a reservation," I said. The receptionist checked her computer. "Yes, I found your reservation. May I see your passport, please?" I gave her my passport. She gave me a room key and explained where my room was. My room was on the third floor. It wasn't very big, but it was comfortable. There was a small bed, a desk, a chair, and a large window. I opened the curtains. I could see the beautiful street below. People were walking. Cars were moving slowly. A man was riding a bicycle. And somewhere nearby, I could hear music. I opened the window and smiled. This was exactly how I had imagined Paris. On Friday evening, after resting for about an hour, I decided to explore the neighborhood. I didn't have a plan. I simply walked. The streets were beautiful. There were small shops, bakeries, cafes, and restaurants. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. I stopped at a bakery and bought a croissant. It was warm and delicious. I sat outside and watched people walking past me. For a moment, I forgot about everything. I wasn't thinking about work. I wasn't thinking about responsibilities. I was simply enjoying the moment. After eating my croissant, I continued walking. Then, suddenly, I saw something that made me stop. The Eiffel Tower was visible in the distance. I had seen it hundreds of times in pictures, but seeing it with my own eyes was completely different. I stood there quietly for a few minutes. The sky was turning orange and the city lights were beginning to appear. I took several pictures. Then I called my family. "I'm in Paris!" Everyone was excited. My mother asked, "Have you seen the Eiffel Tower?" I laughed. "Yes, and it is even more beautiful than I expected." On Saturday morning, the next morning, I woke up early. I wanted to see as much of Paris as possible. I went downstairs to the hotel cafe. I ordered coffee, bread, fruit, and a small pastry. The waiter brought my breakfast to the table. I sat near the window. Outside, the city was slowly waking up. People were going to work. Cafes were opening. Delivery trucks were moving through the streets. I finished my breakfast and started my day. My first destination was the Eiffel Tower. I took the metro. This time I felt more confident. I knew how to read the signs and I knew which direction I needed to go. When I arrived, I was amazed. The Eiffel Tower was much bigger than I had imagined. There were tourists everywhere. People were taking pictures, talking, laughing, and enjoying the view. I walked around for a while. Then I found a quiet place where I could sit. I looked up at the tower. I thought about how many people had stood in the same place before me. It felt special. After visiting the Eiffel Tower, I decided to walk through the city. I wanted to discover places that weren't in my travel guide. I walked through small streets and past beautiful buildings. I stopped at a bookstore. Then I visited a small gift shop. I bought a postcard for my best friend. After that, I continued walking, but after about 30 minutes, I realized something. I was lost. I looked at my phone. The map showed several streets, but I wasn't sure which way to go. I walked for another 10 minutes. That didn't help. Finally, I decided to ask someone for directions. I saw a young man standing near a bus stop. "Excuse me, could you help me?" "Of course." I showed him the address of the restaurant where I wanted to have lunch. He looked at the address. "Oh, it's not far from here. Go straight for 2 blocks, turn left, and you'll see it on your right." "Thank you so much." "You're welcome. Enjoy Paris." I followed his directions and found the restaurant. The restaurant was small and busy. I found a table near the window. A waiter came over and handed me the menu. I looked at the menu carefully. There were many dishes I had never tried before. I decided to try something traditional. The food was delicious. I ate slowly and enjoyed every bite. After lunch, I ordered a cup of coffee. While I was drinking my coffee, I started talking to the person sitting at the next table. He was also visiting Paris. We talked about travel, food, and our favorite cities. It was a short conversation, but it reminded me of something. When you travel, you don't always need a perfect plan. Sometimes the best moments happen unexpectedly. After lunch, I walked toward the river. The weather was pleasant. There were people sitting near the water, reading books and talking with friends. Some people were taking pictures. Others were riding bicycles. I found a bench and sat down. I took out my notebook and wrote, "Sometimes you need to leave your normal life for a few days to see things differently." I didn't know why, but I really liked that sentence. I stayed there for almost an hour. Then I continued walking. I visited a few small shops and bought some souvenirs. I bought a small Eiffel Tower keychain and a postcard. Nothing expensive, just small things to remember the trip. That evening, I decided to visit the Eiffel Tower again. This time, it was dark. The tower was shining against the night sky. Thousands of lights were visible around the city. I stood there and watched the tower for a long time. There were so many people around me, but I still felt peaceful. I took one last picture and put my phone away. I wanted to enjoy the moment without looking at a screen. Later, I found a small restaurant near my hotel. I had dinner and talked to the waiter about Paris. He asked me, "Is this your first time here?" "Yes." "And do you like it?" I smiled. "I love it." He laughed. "Then you have to come back." "I definitely will." Sunday arrived much too quickly. I woke up and realized that I only had one more day in Paris. I didn't want to leave. I packed my suitcase but kept a few things outside because I still wanted to explore. I went back to the bakery from Friday evening. The same woman was working there. I ordered another croissant and a coffee. She recognized me. "You're leaving today?" "Yes, unfortunately." She smiled. "Come back again." "I will." I walked through the neighborhood one last time. I passed the same cafes, the same small shops, the same streets. But somehow everything looked different. Maybe because I knew I was leaving. Before going to the airport, I decided to visit one more place. I found a quiet garden. It wasn't crowded. There were trees, flowers, benches, and people walking slowly. I sat on a bench and looked around. I thought about my weekend. I had arrived in Paris nervous and unsure. I had gotten lost. I had asked strangers for directions. I had tried new food. I had talked to people I had never met. And I had discovered that traveling alone wasn't as scary as I had imagined. In fact, I enjoyed it. I opened my notebook and wrote one final sentence. Sometimes the best way to become confident is to do something that scares you. Then I closed the notebook. Going home. I returned to the hotel, collected my suitcase, and headed to the airport. On the train, I looked out of the window. Paris was slowly disappearing behind me. I felt a little sad, but I was also grateful. The weekend had been short, but it had given me so many memories. At the airport, I checked in and found my gate. While waiting for my flight, I looked through the pictures on my phone. There was the Eiffel Tower, there was the bakery, there was the river, there were the streets. And there was one picture of me standing in front of the Eiffel Tower with a huge smile on my face. I looked at that picture and smiled again. Then I thought, I came to Paris for a weekend, but I will remember this trip for years. When my flight was called, I picked up my bag and walked toward the gate. I knew I was leaving Paris, but I also knew something else. This wouldn't be my last visit. One day I would come back, and maybe next time I wouldn't come for just a weekend. Maybe I would stay for a whole week, maybe even longer. But for now, I had a wonderful memory, a weekend in Paris. And sometimes that's all you need to make life feel a little more beautiful. Thank you for listening to my story. Listen to the story again, pay attention to the sentences, and try to repeat some of the expressions aloud. The more you listen, the more comfortable English will become. See you in the next story.